My ex tried to sue me for $1,130.36. Big mistake. Background: my ex and I were 3 months into separation. I kept suggesting divorce agreements, trying to find out what she would accept other than taking her back and returning to being a doormat for her. I have a good head for legal documents and understood very early that, as much as I would prefer to just burn everything down and disappear, legally, it was very likely that I was going to be paying alimony and that she was entitled to a fair share of everything. But in a no-fault state with no gender references, it did mean a fair share. That meant that, legally, our divorce settlement wouldn't be heavily biased in her favor. So, I kept trying to work with her and figure out how we could divide our assets. I did this every day for months. She would object to anything that put any responsibility on her, anything that left something of value out of her hands. Anytime I asked her what terms she would be okay with, she would just derail the conversation or something else. Not long into this, I realized that I would need a paper trail, so I switched to email only. Throughout all of this, I also recognized that a court would order spousal support, so there wasn't any point in just cutting her off financially. I wasn't a total doormat at this point, though. I had moved my direct deposit to a solo account and kept up with her weekly cash flow, and I kept paying the bills. But my final offer during this period was the heavily unfair offer of splitting the cars, one to each of us, me taking on all the debt, including her student loans, me paying her like $3,000 to $4,000 a month for a year so that she could get her feet under her, and she gets all of our stuff. I would walk away with my car, my dog, some tools, and some clothes. Still, this was a no-go. It wasn't good enough for her, and so we get to the meat of the story for this malicious compliance. 3 months in, I finally get her to agree to a mediator since I'm getting nowhere. She shows up to the initial meeting, the first time we've seen each other in a while, the second time since splitting. She had been staying with her sister. The mediator starts out with the rules of mediation and the agreements to sign. I sign easily, she balks, but eventually signs. Finally, one of the relevant terms is that we agreed not to file any other legal paperwork. We would come to an agreement, and the mediator would file the final court papers on both of our behalf to get the divorce ordered. The mediator starts asking basic questions, and every question to either of us results in my ex launching into an irrelevant topic, attempting emotional manipulation of me or him. I just ignore her and direct my interactions to the mediator. The peak was when she literally crawled on top of the big table to stick her face in mine to force me to see her and engage in her ranting. The mediator called it quits at that point. He reminded her of the rules that she agreed to, gave us homework to fill out, and had us schedule the next meeting with his clerk 2 weeks out. 3 days later, I got served with a summons to court for a hearing over spousal support. The summons showed the claim my ex made that all she had received from me in 3 months was $1,130. Oh man, that wasn't true at all. Not to mention she violated the mediator's terms. I end up on a conference call with my ex and the mediator tells her that she needs to withdraw the complaint or mediation can't continue. She adamantly insists that she knows her rights, so the mediator ends his involvement, cuts us refund checks minus time worked so far, and exits stage left. I prepare for the court hearing. I print out 3 months of bank statements and highlight every transfer to her, every bill paid on her behalf, every ATM withdrawal by her card. Also, over 100 toll bills that I received from her just driving through the express lane toll, so I get the elevated license plate female to me. Altogether it was $133,000 and change. I thought to myself, you missed a couple of zeros in your complaint. My final stack of paper was rather thick, so I printed out an Excel spreadsheet summary to use as a cover sheet. I also looked up the spousal support rules again. Basically, you take the higher person's income and subtract the lower person's income, then the person who makes more money has to pay 40% of that difference to the other person. There's a little wiggle room, but that's it. Simple. She was currently getting up to 72% of my pay once you factored in her bills. This court hearing was a good thing. It wasn't as good as a mediator and having a fast resolution, but I wasn't likely to end up getting screwed here. Not to mention I had daydreams of her finding out what lying on court documents might do. The court date rolls around. I show up to court, waiting in the hall outside the family law section. She shows up, plops herself next to me, and starts going off on me again. I try to ignore her, then to keep from engaging, I start a written transcript of her ranting using the back cover of my paperwork folder. Finally, she realizes what I'm doing and ends the rant with, "Oh, I guess you're writing what I'm saying so you can make your friends hate me. Trust me, they need no encouragement." She huffs, sits a few seats away, and is quiet the rest of the time that we waited. The court officer finally comes to get us, and we head in. The officer starts giving the legal speeches and then asks my ex if she has anything to add to the complaint. She launches into a roller coaster speech, proclaiming all of my bad faults, how mean I was to try to divorce her, and how I obviously didn't need any of the money that I made because he's just going to live somewhere simple and cheap anyways. Yeah, her words. Once my ex is done ranting, the court officer asks me if I have anything I'd like to add. The court officer sees my stack of paper and eyeballs that as she's talking. I hand over the stack of papers, tell the officer that the summary sheet on top should help clear up the financial points in question, and just verbally start going through all the items. At each one, my ex interrupts to give a reason why that item shouldn't count. Every single time, the officer keeps asking her to stop interrupting, but to no avail. We finally finish the list. The officer is shaking her head slightly and says, "Mr. Opp, this court process is to ensure that both parties are doing the right thing. So all of this, she says, gesturing to my stack of papers, needs to stop right now. We will garnish your paychecks for the amount specified by law and send that to her instead. I know that this is a win. I knew that it was going to be, but she didn't. She sat there all smug as we got into the calculations. I know that she was thrilled at the idea of getting a court check directly. It sure would show me. Everything wrapped up, we got the totals, signed the papers, and I handed over a check for the first payment, and the officer got up to make copies of everything. I asked the officer if I could wait in another room while she got the copies, and she agreed while giving my ex a bit of a side eye. I got my paperwork first, with the officer saying it might take a few minutes for her to get her paperwork, but you're free to go. I got the hint and left immediately. I got in my car and immediately called my cell carrier and canceled her phone. They asked me, does she want to set up her own plan? I replied, I can't answer that. I'm hoping for a court order to remove her from my accounts. Okay, they said. Then I just worked down the remaining subscriptions that I was paying for that she used. I even had all the bills in front of me from the court documents with the account numbers and customer service numbers right there. I was done and driving home when she started blowing up my phone with incoming emails, demanding to know what I was doing, then texts from her sister's phone, then calls. I just grinned and didn't answer any of them. She stopped after an hour or so and gave me a few hours of silence. Then I got an all-caps email with a screenshot of the Netflix inactive account message. Oh my god, even Netflix. I admit it, I giggled. The fallout wasn't over, though. A month later, after she realized how much less money she got from me after winning her case, she filed an appeal. It was denied due to a lack of a reason. A month later, she filed a complaint that I wasn't paying her car payments. This was just an excuse to get into court. I had been paying it, and I was also pretty confident that even if I hadn't, she didn't know how to get into that loans account. She legally could, she just never had cared to learn how. This time I had a lawyer, and we both went to court. My ex was joining by phone. The officer paused before calling my ex and tells my lawyer, this lady is a piece of work. The validation of that statement will always remain with me. The call goes predictably. My ex makes irrelevant rants. The officer keeps shutting her down. Finally, the court officer asks my ex for proof that I wasn't making my car payments while she's holding documents proving that I had been. My ex nearly screams, I just know that he isn't so that he can hurt me. The officer replies, I am holding proof that he has paid it and is satisfying his legal obligation. This complaint is dismissed. Thank you, and hangs up on my ex.